Angela. Welcome back. We're going to finish the lecture, the scuba lecture today on Isaiah 41. And we'll get started on that. What was the last thing that you filled in on your sheet? The what?
This harkens back to creation.
Right, harkens back to creation. Okay. So we see in these verses, I'm going to reread these verses, and you'll see where it, actually, that's, yeah. So we'll start at 5. The coastlands have seen and are afraid. The ends of the earth tremble and they have drawn near. Everyone helps his neighbor and says to his brother, be strong. The craftsman strengthens the goldsmith, and he who smooths with a hammer him who strikes the anvil, saying of the soldering, it is good, and they strengthen it with nails so that it cannot be moved. So we see this these people who are building better idols, hoping that those will protect them from Cyrus, who's coming from the east and obliterating the nations. And it harkens back to creation in that they say of their creation, it is good. Even though it's worthless, they say it is good. And remember how God, when he brought forth creation, he proclaimed his creation to be good, and it was. So this whole passage of 5 through 7, and even 2 through 7, I believe that where God is defending himself, where he is kind of on trial and defending himself and against the nations and against the idols that they make. I think that Isaiah is asking his readers to ponder this question. And the question is this: who is the creator and who is the creation in this picture? In other words, the creator is God, and everything else is the creation, right? Everything else, including those idols, are created and are not the creator. And so Isaiah's point in all of this is this: if we do not have the God who revealed himself to us, then we will have to have gods we have made for ourselves. It's the only choice left to us. Either, and I've told you this many times, but it's worth repeating, we were created to worship. Either we will worship the God of the universe, or we will worship something that is not the God of the universe. But if we choose to do that, we are worshiping idols of our own creation. We are worshiping the created instead of the creator. And they are gods that we have made for ourselves. And they are gods that are powerless, non-existent, unworthy of our worship. But that is the only choice left to us if we refuse to worship the God of the universe, is to worship gods of our own that can't help us, that have no power. So at this point then, after verse 7, God is going to turn and to address his people Israel. And here's what he says: but you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend, you whom I took from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest corners, saying to you, you are my servant, I have chosen you, and not cast you off. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Behold, all who are incensed against you shall be put to shame and confounded. Those who strive against you shall be as nothing and shall perish. You shall seek those who contend with you, but you shall not find them. Those who war against you shall be as nothing at all. For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not. I am the one who helps you. Fear not, you worm Jacob, you men of Israel. I am the one who helps you, declares the Lord. Your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel. Behold, I make of you a threshing sledge, new, sharp, and having teeth. You shall thresh the mountains and crush them, and you shall make the hills like chaff. You shall winnow them, and the wind shall carry them away, and the tempest shall scatter them. And you shall rejoice in the Lord, in the Holy One of Israel, you shall glory. When the poor and needy seek water, and there is none, and their tongue is parched with thirst, I, the Lord, will answer them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will open rivers on the bare heights and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water and the dry land springs of water. And I will put in the wilderness the cedar, the acacia, the myrtle, and the olive. And I will set in the desert the cypress, the plane, and the pine together, that they may see and know, may consider and understand together, that the hand of the Lord has done this. The Holy One of Israel has created it. So remember, this is, yes?
What does winnow mean?
What is what?
Winnow.
Winnow means to kind of to harvest or to separate in the harvest. To winnow something out is to take what is good and get rid of what is bad. So you keep the grain, but you throw away the chaff. So I want you to remember that this is prophecy, right? And it's prophecy written 200 years before the things happen. And this is a promise made to God's people, Israel. But what I want you to understand is what I told you yesterday, that this promise wasn't just for God's people in exile. It wasn't just for the nation Israel. It is also for us. Remember, we talked about that yesterday, that we are God's people. He came to his own, Jesus came to his own, and his own people did not receive him, but to those who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, to them, God gave the right to become children. So this promise is for us, and here's what God is telling us. There's nothing to fear. Unlike the nations around them, these Israelites and we serve the one true living God. We don't serve worthless idols like the surrounding nations. God has the power to help them. Obviously, he's made that case. He has the power to help us as well. But there's still a question. God has the power to help them, but does he want? Someone can have the power to help you and refuse to help. Because they just don't want to. So does God want to help? Well, God answers this question too. He says, I am with you. So he is with them. He has not cast them off. God has not forgotten his promise to Abraham. And because of that promise, therefore, he will not abandon Abraham's offspring. And then God says that he is not far off. He is with them to strengthen them, to help and uphold them. I love that word, uphold. What a beautiful word picture that is. It's a picture of someone propping another person up. This morning at our teacher prayer time, Mr. Hood read Jude 24 and 25. And it says, now, to him who is able to keep you from falling. And then it goes on to say, to him be the honor and the glory forever. But that word in the Greek literally means, that word for keep you from falling, literally means to him who is able to prop you. When we are unable to stand, when we are too weak to run, to walk, to stay upright, God will prop us. I remembered something that happened a long time ago that I think is just a picture of what God does for us. And so I found the video, the actual footage. This footage is from the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. And the runner right in the 400 is a British man named Derek Redmond. And we're going to watch, it's about 2.5, 3 minutes of this actual footage from the Olympics. And then I'm going to apply that to what we're talking about. Now, this might take me a minute to figure out. I'm still learning the ins and outs of. So,
Having a great match back at Olympic Stadium in Barcelona. Coming up to the men's 400 meter semifinals. Lane assignments. Lewis in lane 3. Lewis in lane 3. Rebecca Hernandez in 4. Running very, very quickly. Inside of Lewis, Sunday Connor. And Derek Redmond of Great Britain has pulled up with an injury. Redmond is out. Derek Redmond, the British first member of that British 4x400 meter relay team, doesn't want anybody to help him. Being lost for 5-0. He's going to try to finish the semifinal race. The British have a certain tradition of running, which you have to respect. His first semifinal of the men's 400 meters. Up with an injury, coming down the back stretch. He's finding out those trying to help him to finish the race. Too much. This time, approaches the finish line, the importance of
that to me is a perfect picture of what God is saying when He says, "I will uphold you." You have this runner, Derek Redmond, who is injured. He is broken. He cannot run on his own. That is us. Whether we like it or not, whether we admit it or not, we are all tragically broken and marred by sin, and we cannot run this race of life. And so from out of the stands comes Derek Redmond's father. And he puts his arm around his son to embrace him, to uphold him. and Derek is pushing him away, right? That's also us. Say, no, I'm going to do it myself. The first thing a kid learns to say is no, and then the next thing they learn to say is, the first sentence is, I do it myself. Little 2-year-old kid wanting to tie his shoes literally cannot do it and says, I do it myself. You've got a baby sister, right? You ever see that in her? She wants to do it, but she can't, right? That's us too. We want to live life on our own terms, but we can't. And it turns out poorly for us when we try. And so finally, Derek submits to his father. And when other people try to cut in and get to Derek, what does his father do? Go away. Get away from me. He's my son. That's a picture of God protecting us, upholding us, even carrying us. And this is what God is promising for us in these verses. I will uphold you with my righteous right. That's a picture. This video is a picture of what God says He will do for us in our darkest time. He will not abandon us. He will uphold us. So verses 17 through 20 are a picture, or a summary, of what God will do. When the poor and needy seek water, and there is none, and their tongue is parched with thirst, I, the Lord, will answer them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will open rivers on the bare heights and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water. I will put in the wilderness the cedar, the acacia, the myrtle, and the olive. I will set in the desert the cypress, the plane, and the pine together, that they may see and know, may consider and understand together that the hand of the Lord has done this, the Holy One of Israel. This is a picture of a God who can do the impossible. It is impossible to grow those trees in the desert. It is impossible to bring streams out of the desert. But God can do that. Here's John Oswald, Dr. Oswald saying, His people are spiritually dry and desolate. Their hopes are gone and their dreams broken. Yet this God, who is not part of the cosmic system, he's outside of space and time, and thus not captive to it, can do what is new and unheard of. He can make rivers flow on mountaintops and cause pools to spring up in the desert. Our God is sovereign over the entire universe. He can do. And it is this same God who comes to our aid, our rescue, in our darkest times. But here's the real question. Why? Why would the God of the universe even care? Why does God want to be near his people who rebel against him, who curse him? Why does God want to be near his people to comfort them and uphold them? Well, part of the answer is because he loves us. But another part of the answer comes in verse 20, where it begins with the word that. I love the word that, or the phrase so that in the Bible. It's one of my favorite phrases. Because usually when we see that or so that, God is about to tell us what he's going to do, what he will do if we obey. Or what will happen as the result of our obedience. So take a look at the that here. It says, I'm doing all this. I'm doing all these things for you. I'm upholding you. I'm not casting you off. So that they may see and know, may consider and understand together that the hand of the Lord has done this. The Holy One of Israel has created. My mother used to say, she'd say, they say that that restaurant is really good. Or she'd say, they say that movie is long. And we always wonder, who's they? Who are these they that say this? We finally figured out actually it was her friend Marilyn, but Marilyn became they. But here we see that word they, that they may see and know. Who? Who is it that's supposed to see and know that God is the Lord? Is that raising your hand or are you stretching? Just stretching. Okay. Who do you think it is? It's not Marilyn. Oh, Mike. Go ahead, Anna. Okay. The people of Israel, right? But it's not you, right? And I think this is true for the people of Israel. But I think even more, he's saying those surrounding nations that don't know me. God doesn't just love Israel. God doesn't just love his people. He loves all people. For God, it doesn't say for God so loved Israel or for God so loved Christians. It says for God so loved. And so he's saying, look, you take comfort in me. You allow me to take care of you so that the nations may know that I am God, so that others might come to know him as well. So why does God want to be near his people? In part, because he loves them. But he loves the nations too. So look at what it says. It says that so that the world may see the evidence of what God has done for his people. And see that he is indeed God, the Holy One of Israel. God so loved the world that he gave his one Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. God desires that to gather the nations to himself. The idol-worshiping nations, he desires in places in the Old Testament it talks about he's like a hen gathering his chicks. He wants to gather the nations to himself as a hen gathers her chicks. Every tribe, every tongue, every nation will worship before the throne of God in heaven. And God is in the business of revealing who he is to the world so that they too may be saved. So how do we apply then these verses that we read? I want to talk about God's response when we are afraid. Is this all still true? All these promises that he made to Israel, are they still true? I think his response is exactly the same, no matter what we're afraid of. God is telling us we don't need to be afraid. Not of COVID, not of the past or the future, not of death, not of anyone or anything. Why? Because we are not alone. He is with us. The God who made us and who stands outside of space and time is right here with us. Remember John 1:14 that says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Remember that word means tabernacle or pitched his tent right next to ours. Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. That's what Emmanuel means, God with us. Not only does Isaiah 41 say that God is with us, it also tells us that God will help us. He promises that. The creator of the universe, the all-powerful God, is our helper. Why should we be afraid? There is no need to fear anything. God is with us, and He will help us. Now, I want to make sure you understand what this doesn't mean. This doesn't mean we will never experience failure or trials or heartache. We will. I'm pretty blessed. I haven't experienced as much heartache as some have. But I have watched my father slowly slip away through Alzheimer's. I have watched my mother struggle with and be in pain from cancer. Yes. Or heartache. I've lost 2 children before they were born. But mostly I've had it compared to some. But here is what God is telling me, that even in that heart, even in those trials, God is there. Because God has promised never to leave us or forsake us. That is what Hebrews 13:5 says. So, what this does mean, though, is that we don't need to fear. God's presence is not contingent on our success or our ability to live life in a certain way. It is contingent. God's presence is contingent on His promises and His faithfulness, which are perfect. He'll never leave us or forsake us. And the Holy Spirit is the seal of that promise. He is God with us. And by His Spirit, He not only lives with us, He lives in us. So in our deepest, darkest times, we can lean hard into Him and into the truth that God is with us. The year before you became 8th graders, I changed, 2 years before, I changed the 8th grade curriculum for history. And when you were in 8th grade, if you were in 8th grade, you read Unbroken. And that's the book I changed to because it was American history and this was a truly American story. Before that time, the 8th graders read a book by Corrie ten Boom called The Hiding Place. How many of you are familiar with it? That's sad. Watch the movie The Hiding Place. And it's a beautiful story, and I'm about to tell you the gist of it. But it's a story about a Dutch family, not an American, and I wanted an American story. But here's Corrie ten Boom's story. She was the daughter of a watchmaker who lived in a city in Holland, in the Netherlands. And that family, they were Christians. And so their father, Betsy was her older sister. So Corrie and Betsy and their father lived in this house. And they had other family members that lived nearby. And Corrie and Betsy never married, so they lived with their father, and they decided to harbor Jews, to hide Jews in their home after the Nazis took control of the Netherlands. And they got caught. And their entire family, their entire extended family, was arrested. Fortunately for Betsy and Corrie, they went to the same concentration camp. And the horrors of that place were horrific. And Betsy became ill and died. And Corey was the only member of her family to survive. Every member of her family was killed. And I watched the movie years ago, the first time I watched the movie, and what I didn't realize was at the end of it, the movie was made while Corey ten Boom was still alive. At the end of it, the real Corey ten Boom came on the screen to say something. And I remember becoming so emotional when I realized here's the woman. And here's what Corey ten Boom had to say to the people listening. And now I say it on behalf of Corey, who's with Jesus in heaven, to you. She said, I promised, in her beautiful Dutch accent, I promised my sister that if I survived the concentration camp, I would tell as many people as I possibly could that no pit is so deep, that God is not deeper. I'm telling you. And so I'm telling you, with almost 60 years of experience on this planet, 42 of which I've walked with you, no pit is so deep that God is not deeper. And He longs to have a relationship. And if He has relationship, He will be with you, He will live in you, and He will uphold you with His righteousness. Father, thank you for your love for us. It is astounding. Not only that you love us, but the way you love us, the way you uphold us. To keep that picture in our mind of a father upholding his son as one that is the way you uphold us. We live each day of our lives firmly connected. I pray for Jesus. Okay, that's it for today. You can chat.